The phone rang at 11:47 p.m., 4 days after the moving trucks pulled away, and Elena Voss almost didn't answer it because the number wasn't saved. She answered anyway. A woman's voice, thin and fast, said only this: "Don't tell your husband. Come alone. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., the diner on Route 9. I sold you that house and I need to tell you what I didn't put in the disclosure." Then the line went dead before Elena could ask a single question. She stood in her new kitchen, holding a phone that had gone silent, staring at boxes she hadn't unpacked yet, and felt something she couldn't name settle into her chest like cold water finding the lowest point in a room. Behind her, down the hall, she could hear her husband Daniel humming while he screwed a shelf bracket into the nursery wall, cheerful, unbothered, exactly the way a man sounds when nothing is wrong. She didn't call the number back. She wrote it on the inside of her wrist in ballpoint pen, like a woman preparing evidence before she even understood there was a case. If you know the feeling of a stranger's voice telling you to keep a secret from the person sleeping next to you, stay through this one, and tell me in the comments the moment you knew your gut was right before your mind caught up. For 3 days, Elena did what disciplined people do. She said nothing. She made breakfast. She hung the curtains. She let Daniel walk her through the backyard, pointing out where the garden beds would go, and she smiled at the right moments because smiling costs nothing and buys time. The house itself gave her no reason for alarm, a 1930s colonial with good bones, bought at a price so far under market that their realtor had called it a once-in-a-decade find, the kind of phrase realtors use when they want you to stop asking why. Elena had asked why once in the beginning. Daniel had said the sellers were motivated, an elderly woman moving into assisted living, wanted a fast close, didn't want to deal with staging or open houses. It had sounded reasonable then. It sounded different now, turning it over at 2 in the morning with her husband's breathing steady beside her. The one detail she couldn't fold neatly into normalcy was the basement door. It had a deadbolt on it, not the kind that locks people out, but the kind installed to lock something in, mounted high on the outside facing the stairs. Daniel had laughed when she pointed it out on the walkthrough. Old house, old habits, probably kept the dog down there. She'd laughed too. She told herself it was nothing. Old houses had strange choices baked into them by people who were no longer alive to explain themselves, but she noticed, days later, that the deadbolt had been oiled recently, not rusted like everything else original to the house, oiled and turning easy like someone had used it not long before they left. She met the woman at the diner at 10:04 a.m., 4 minutes late on purpose, because arriving early to a stranger's summons felt like handing over more power than she wanted to give. The woman was maybe 70, in a coat too heavy for the weather, hands wrapped around a coffee cup she never drank from. She introduced herself as Marguerite Hale, said she'd owned the house for 31 years, and then said something that made Elena go very still. "I didn't sell you that house because I wanted to leave it. I sold it because I got scared enough to leave it fast, and your husband knew that and he used it." Elena asked her to explain. Marguerite shook her head, eyes wet, and said only, "Ask him who Priya something is. Ask him why he called me 11 times in the 2 weeks before closing, when the buyer's agent is supposed to be the one calling. And ask him why he wanted the deed put only in your name." Then she stood, dropped a 10 on the table she hadn't earned, and left before Elena could get a last name, a phone number, anything but a coffee cup with lipstick on the rim and a silence that rang louder than the bell over the door. Elena didn't go home. She sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes running the sentence again and again. He wanted the deed put only in your name because it was true, and she hadn't thought much of it at the time. Daniel had framed it as generosity. "You've never had something that's just yours," he'd said, filling out the paperwork at the closing table while she signed where the tab said "sign here." She'd felt loved that day. Now the word sat wrong in her mouth, like fruit gone soft at the center. She called the one person she trusted enough to say it out loud to, her college roommate Priya Andal, a paralegal who had spent a decade reading the fine print in other people's disasters. Priya didn't ask if Elena was sure. She asked one question: "What's the address and who's the title company?" Then she told Elena to get her a copy of the closing documents before Daniel got home, and to act, for one more day, like nothing in the world had changed. That night Elena cooked dinner and asked Daniel lightly how he'd found the house, and watched him answer with a story so smooth it had clearly been told before, an open house he'd wandered into on a whim, love at first sight, a lucky break with a motivated seller. It was, she realized, the kind of story a man tells when he's already decided which version of events belongs to his wife. The closing documents took Priya 2 days to make sense of, and when she called, her voice had the particular flatness of someone trying very hard not to sound frightened. Elena, the deed's in your name only, which means if anything happens to the house, fire, structural failure, whatever, the insurance claim goes through you. Fine, normal even, but the title company Daniel used isn't the one your realtor recommended. It's a two-person operation out of a strip mall, and it's owned by a woman named Sable Cho, and Sable Cho's name is also on the seller disclosure as the buyer's agent who represented you. Elena sat with that for a moment before she understood what Priya was telling her. He worked with the same person on both sides of the transaction. He worked with the same person who has represented him personally on 2 other property deals in the last 4 years, Priya said. I found her name in county records tied to a rental he owned before you two got married. Elena, I don't think this was luck. I think this was planned before you ever saw the listing. Elena went quiet for so long that Priya said her name twice. When Elena finally spoke, her voice had changed, flatter, colder, the voice of someone deciding not to cry until it was useful. Find out everything about Sable Cho, and find out what happened to the old owner. Marguerite said she got scared enough to leave fast. I want to know what scared her. It took a week, working carefully, quietly, never asking Daniel a single direct question, because Elena had understood by then that the moment he knew she was looking, whatever he was building would either accelerate or vanish, and she needed it whole before she moved. She learned that Marguerite Hale had lived in that house alone since her husband's death, that she had, 18 months before the sale, taken out a small home safety loan to fix wiring the inspector had flagged. Wiring that ran, curiously, right past that basement door with the old deadbolt. She learned that a contractor named Ruel Ferris had done the work, that Ruel Ferris had also done renovation work on 2 properties owned by Daniel, and that Ruel Ferris, when Priya finally reached him under the pretense of a home insurance audit, said something that made Priya call Elena at 11 at night, breaking her own rule about only sharing things in daylight. He said the wiring job wasn't a repair, Priya told her. He said it was a rerouting. Someone wanted a gas line rerouted closer to a junction box in that basement, under a floor that gets walked on every day. He said he told the woman who hired him it was dangerous, and she got so upset she fired him mid-job and had someone else finish it. Elena, the someone else who finished it, was paid by a Shell LLC. I pulled the LLC. It's registered to Sable Cho's brother. Elena sat on the edge of her bed in the house she now understood was not a home but a mechanism, and she asked the only question that mattered. Say it plainly. What are you telling me this house is? Priya's voice was very quiet. I'm telling you somebody built a way to make an accident happen in that basement. And I'm telling you the person whose name is on the deed, the person who'd be alone in the house when it happened, the person who'd collect the insurance, and then, eventually, everything else, is you. If that landed the way it should have, don't scroll past it. Tell me right now in the comments what you'd do in the next 60 seconds if you found out the house you just moved into wasn't a gift. It was a trap with your name already signed on it. Elena didn't scream. She didn't confront Daniel that night or the next or the one after that, though every instinct she had told her to. Instead, she did something that surprised even Priya. She went cold deliberately, the way a surgeon goes cold before an incision, because feeling everything at once would have meant losing the one advantage she had left, that nobody yet knew she'd found the wiring, the LLC, the coffee cup with lipstick on the rim. She kept living in the house. She kept sleeping 4 feet from a man who might be counting the days until a gas line failed. She told herself this was strategy, not denial, and most nights she believed it. What she needed now wasn't more fear. She needed proof strong enough that no lawyer, no detective, no jury could later be told it was a grieving wife's paranoia. She found her fixer through Priya, a retired insurance fraud investigator named Thomas Reyes, who now did private consulting for people who couldn't go to the police yet because what they had was smoke and not fire. Reyes met her in a coffee shop 2 towns over, listened to the whole account without interrupting once, and then said the thing that made Elena finally exhale. You're not crazy, and you're not early. If anything, you're late enough that they're probably getting impatient, which is good for us, because impatient people get sloppy. He laid out what she needed: documentation of the rewiring done under false pretenses, proof of the shared financial relationship between Daniel and Sable Cho going back years, and the piece that would turn a suspicious pattern into an unambiguous plot, evidence of intent, ideally in someone's own words. People like this, Reyes said, always think they're smarter than the paper trail. They never think someone's listening. The plan Reyes built with Elena wasn't a confrontation. It was a lure. Elena would tell Daniel casually over dinner that she wanted to have the basement finished, a home office, she'd say, now that she was thinking about working remotely. She would ask him to get his guy to look at it again, to make sure everything was up to code before they broke ground. It was a reasonable, wifely, entirely unthreatening request, and it would force Daniel's hand. Either he'd have to bring Ferris's replacement contractor back to inspect a rerouted gas line he needed no one official to ever examine closely, or he'd have to stall in a way that, on its own, would look strange. Ray's wired the basement legally, with a device disclosed later in any proceeding, a small recorder tucked behind the very junction box the county records said had been repaired, and then they waited. They didn't wait long. 3 nights after Elena made her request, she woke at 1 a.m. to an empty side of the bed and the soft, careful sound of someone descending stairs trying not to be heard. She lay still, heart flat and controlled, and listened to Daniel's footsteps cross into the kitchen, heard the back door open, heard a car she didn't recognize idle at the curb. She didn't go to the window. She let Ray's recorder do what recorders do. What it caught over the next 11 minutes was Daniel's voice, low, and a woman's voice Elena had never heard except once faintly, over a bad phone connection months before signing papers she now understood differently. "She's asking about the basement," Daniel said. "She wants to finish it into an office. That's actually good, Sable, that's better. Nobody questions a wife wanting a nice office, and it puts her down there more, not less." The woman's voice clipped and businesslike in a way that made Elena's skin crawl. "You said 6 months, Daniel. It's been 4 if Marguerite talks to anyone else. She won't. She's terrified of her own name being in it. She's sold under duress. She's not going to volunteer that to a lawyer. She's just going to sit in that facility and hope it goes away." A pause, then Sable again, flatter. "And the policy? Triples on accidental death in the home." "I upped it 8 months ago, told the agent we'd just gotten married, wanted to protect each other. Nobody blinks at that." Then, quieter, almost gentle, the tone of a man who has practiced saying something terrible until it sounds ordinary. "It has to look like an accident, Sable. Not tonight, not next month either. Soon enough that it still reads as new household wiring, late enough that no one connects it to us." Elena listened to the recording twice alone in Ray's office, with her hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake in front of him. She did not cry. Ray's watched her carefully, the way people watch someone standing near a ledge, and said only, "You don't have to do anything with this tonight." Elena said, "I know exactly what I'm doing with it," and her voice was steady in a way that unsettled even him. "If you've ever had to sit across from someone and pretend you didn't already know the truth, stay with me, because what happens next is the part people always say they wish they'd had the nerve to do, and I need you watching all the way to the end to see exactly how she does it." What Elena did not do was scream at Daniel across the kitchen table. What she did not do was pack a bag in the middle of the night and vanish to her mother's house, though some part of her wanted to, badly, every single evening for the next 2 weeks. Instead, she kept cooking dinner. She kept asking about the basement contractor, kept letting Daniel believe the trap he'd set was closing exactly the way he wanted it to. Ray's, meanwhile, built the rest of the case in daylight, where it belonged. Banking records subpoenaed through a discreet attorney showing 11 wire transfers between Daniel and Sable Cho's LLC over 3 years, disguised as consulting fees. The insurance policy itself, upgraded 8 months prior with a rider Daniel had signed alone, using a notary who turned out to share an office suite with Sable Cho. And most damning of all, a second recording taken a week later, of Sable Cho telling Daniel on the phone with startling coldness, "Marguerite's granddaughter called me asking questions about the wiring invoice. I need you to handle that before it becomes a problem." And Daniel answering without hesitation, "I'll take care of it," in a voice Elena had once mistaken for the sound of a man who protected her. Ray's brought in a detective he trusted, not the local department, where he suspected reach he couldn't verify, but a state fraud unit 2 counties over that handled cases exactly like this one, cases built quietly and delivered whole. Elena sat in a windowless room and told her story once, cleanly, with documents in chronological order, the way Ray's had coached her, because emotion invites doubt and precision invites belief. The detective, a woman named Osai with a face that gave away nothing, asked only one question at the end. "Do you want us to move now, or do you want to help us catch them finishing it?" Elena thought of the deadbolt on the basement door, oiled and easy, and said, "Catch them finishing it. I want there to be no version of this where anyone gets to call it an accident." The trap they built together was simple and merciless in its simplicity. Elena told Daniel the contractor was finally scheduled Saturday morning, while she'd be out running errands, conveniently giving him and whoever he brought a clean window in the house alone. What Daniel didn't know was that the contractor Ray's sent in his place was wired for both audio and video, that Detective Osai's team had a van 2 houses down, and that the man Daniel let into the basement that morning wasn't there to reroute a gas line. He was there to watch one attempted, live on camera, by Daniel and a second man Elena had never seen before, a man who turned out to be Sable Cho's brother, the LLC's silent signatory. Called in specifically because he'd done the original off-book work and knew exactly which fitting to loosen and which to leave looking untouched. They were arrested in the basement of the house Elena now owned outright, free and clear, with a fitting half loosened in Daniel's hand and a recording that captured him saying, to a stranger in a hardware store polo, just enough that it looks slow, not sudden, I don't want it obvious, about the wife sleeping 4 feet from him every night for 6 weeks while he waited for his own patients to become her death certificate. Sable Cho was picked up separately at the strip mall title office, mid-call with a different client, and made the mistake every overconfident person makes. She reached first for her phone to delete something, which is precisely the motion Detective Osai's team had been told to expect and had a warrant already covering. Elena did not go to the arraignment to watch Daniel's face when the charges were read. She sent Ray's instead, and asked for one thing only, a full accounting in writing of every dollar, every date, every lie, assembled clean enough that when the divorce filing went in the same week as the criminal complaint, there would be no ambiguity for any judge to hide behind. Marguerite Hale, when Priya finally reached her at the assisted living facility with a gentler version of the truth, cried for a long time and then said the only thing she had left to give, she would testify. She had been afraid to for 18 months, had told herself the sale was clean, had let herself believe leaving fast was the same as leaving safely. She was done believing that. Attempted murder for financial gain, insurance fraud, conspiracy. The charges stack the way charges do when a case is built patiently instead of desperately, and neither Daniel nor Sable Cho nor her brother had the kind of money or connections it takes to make that stack of evidence disappear. Elena testified once in a deposition, and Reyes told her afterward that the state's attorney had called it the cleanest civilian testimony he'd heard in a decade. No tears, no theatrics, dates and documents recited the way a person recites something they've made themselves memorize precisely because they knew someday someone would ask them to say it once and say it right. She didn't burn the house down, symbolically or otherwise, though she thought about it more than once in the months that followed. Instead, she had the basement gutted properly, by a contractor Reyes vetted personally, and turned it into exactly what she told Daniel she wanted, an office quiet, with good light from a window well she had enlarged herself, sketching the plans at the same kitchen table where she'd once smiled at a man's easy lies. She kept the house, not out of sentiment. Out of something closer to principle, she had paid, in full, in a currency no insurance policy could measure, for every square foot of it, and she was not going to let the man who tried to buy her death with her own name hand her a reason to leave. Marguerite Hale died 11 months later, of causes that had nothing to do with any of it, in the assisted living facility she'd chosen for herself, and Elena was the one who arranged the modest service, because no one else did, and because some debts you pay simply for being the last person who understood what they cost. Priya still calls every Sunday. Reyes sends a single text every few months, nothing more than a case number and the word closed, and Elena has learned to read those 2 words as the closest thing to peace this particular story was ever going to offer her. On the anniversary of the night the phone rang at 11:47, Elena sat alone in the basement office, in the good light from the enlarged window well, and did not think about Daniel's voice on the recording or Sable Cho's flat instructions or the deadbolt that used to hang above those stairs. She thought about Marguerite. Standing up from a diner table with a $10 bill she hadn't earned, walking out into the cold because some part of her, even afraid, even guilty, could not let it happen to someone else the way it had almost happened to her. Elena kept a photograph of no one on her desk. She kept instead the original disclosure form, framed, blank spaces and all, a reminder that the most dangerous lies are never the ones people tell you, they're the ones they simply leave out. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, for the first time in the house's long and complicated history, the silence belonged to no one but her. Elena reached over, closed her laptop, and turned off the desk lamp. And that was it, no monologue, no last line delivered to the dark. Just a woman locking her own front door from the inside, for the first time since she'd learned what that house could cost someone. If this is the kind of story that makes you check the locks twice tonight, hit follow, because next week's case starts with a text that reads, "He's not who you think he married." And I promise you, it gets worse before it gets even.